So I'm out here at the Temple of Literature in Hanoi, and I thought it would be very topical to talk about how information and knowledge is really dependent on your perspective. Now, coming to a foreign country, it is far more apparent to me, it's almost in my face, in the fact that I don't speak Vietnamese. I don't understand Vietnamese either, and learning about languages, you can kind of see how words and information is constructed in different ways. The way that information is constructed changes the way we understand and interpret it. In other words, the language we use, or the points of definition, completely alter how we understand the information. You might have heard of this idea before, but it's really groundbreaking. It's really eye-opening when you think about it, because it challenges everything that you've learned. At a young age, you've been told the leaf is brown, but then you go to another country and maybe the leaf is yellow. You're like, what is it? Yellow leaf, right?
Or
now,
red leaf?
Red leaf, you're like, no way, it destroys my view of reality, right? Now that's kind of a silly example, but when it comes to things we believe, or comes down to things we experience, or it questions and it confronts information as you've learned it. And this is a good thing. Amazing. So let's talk about belief systems. When we see things in our life, we often believe something about them. Now, it might be a very concrete thing, right? Like, this is a hat, or the sky is blue, or I believe that gravity will keep me down here. And it's based on a lot of evidence, it's based on a lot of understanding. You understand the world through trial and error, experimentation, and scientific observation, right? But when it comes to something more subtle, something less concrete, but something, that you can't really put your hands on it, something less material, now I'm thinking of things like emotions and intentions, things like that. We often believe things about these more subtle things, but we can't exactly define it. We can't really put our finger on it, right? If I told you define what confidence was, could you actually do it? Probably not, right? It's not something you can easily define. You can't put your hand on, you can't put your finger on it. So you might say, okay, let's condense it down. What does it really mean? Well, there's some sensations I'm feeling in my body, certain emotions, and maybe we take that all the way down to neuroscience, and we can say, I'm quantifying it to chemicals, neurochemistry, and all this stuff. And now you can say, confidence is the sum of neurochemicals plus chemistry, plus this, plus thought, plus that. You can kind of see that there's a lot of different subtle aspects and subtle layers that make up this blanket statement we call confidence. In other words, confidence is dependent, it's originating based on the summation of all these micro factors and micro causes all the way down the chain. Pretty crazy to think about, isn't it? You know what's more crazy? When it comes to belief systems, this is where the beauty really lies, right? Like, if you want to have a transformation in your life, people talk about examine your belief system, examine your limiting beliefs. But the crazy thing is, it's actually pretty hard. It's actually a very difficult problem to solve, and people don't tell you this. They will never tell you that it's a difficult problem to solve, because when people talk about belief systems and limiting beliefs, they're seeing it in a very naive light. Let's talk about something like, I'm really liking confidence today, so I'm going to use confidence as another example. Let's talk about something like confidence. Let's say you have the belief system that I'm not a confident person. And then you go to a Tony Robbins seminar, he pumps you up, and now you are like, I'm confident, I'm going to believe in myself. So you now have this belief, I'm going to believe in myself no matter what happens. So then you go out into some experiences and the belief system is tested, right? I believe in myself. And you might be, quote unquote, delusionally confident. What are the pros of this? Well, there's many positives. You know, you now feel better, you feel more empowered, feel more like a go-getter, you're going in that direction. You don't look at the doubts, you don't let the doubts hold you back. Amazing stuff, right? And this is what people like Tony Robbins talk about. But what are some cons of this? Well, firstly, you now believe that I should be a certain way. You believe that experience should be a certain way. When you go through an experience and it goes against what you believe, well then you may not be so happy. And so, perfect example, you go through experience, it confronts that belief system, and now you've created some aversion to feeling the thing. You've now suppressed it. For example, many people that try to be delusionally positive actually cause a lot of suppression, because now they are suppressing all sorts of aspects of themselves because they are afraid of looking at those parts of themselves. Because now, if they were to look at those parts of themselves, it comes into direct conflict with that belief system of I'm a confident person. So they suppress, disown, and deny all parts of themselves that do not show that. That also might mean they start to play small, right? Because if you're trying to uphold this belief system, I'm a confident person, and lots of different scenarios and events in your life kind of make you feel like you're not so confident, well, what are you going to do? You're not going to go into those experiences because you really are attached now to this so quote unquote positive belief. So now the positive belief is actually not so positive, it's actually kind of holding you back in a certain way. Isn't that crazy? So what do we do now? Well, as you mature, you might start to develop a second belief. So you might have the first belief, and you realize, oh, there's actually some nuance to it. There's some nuance to the situation. So you develop a second belief system. And you layer that on top. So now you have the first belief, but because you see the downsides of that belief, you have another belief system. Could be, okay, in these situations, in these scenarios, I'm going to believe something different, or I'm going to see the situation in different lights. Now you have a second belief, but that second belief has its own pros and cons, which creates, well, eventually a lesson which will make you hopefully incorporate a third belief, and then a fourth belief, and then a fifth. In other words, you dive into this chain of nuanced beliefs. What I'm trying to say here is, as we learn, as we experience things, the beliefs become more refined, more and more refined, more and more fine-grained, as we see that every belief has positives and negatives. Every belief is holding us back in some way. And so when we can shift out of this concrete thing as the belief to more of the subtle nature, and the subtle nature starts to reveal the dependent nature of it, the originating nature of how these are points, and we're trying to reference ourselves through these different things to operate in the world. This is where you can start to play with the beliefs that arise. In other words, you aren't going to be so held back by them, but you can play in the space of this fluid, dynamic nature. So as I'm here in the temple of literature, I thought it would be the most topical thing to talk about. We're limited by beliefs, but we also need to have them, because it allows us to operate. There's this idea of suppression, there's this idea of just don't believe anything. I don't think that's true. I don't think you can possibly do that. I can touch on that in another video. I think even if you're operating from a space of no thoughts, you're like an enlightened dude, you're not thinking, even then, you have subconscious beliefs. So we want to examine the beliefs. But we want to do it in a way that's not blind following, blind creation of a new belief system. We don't want to just like Tony Robbins pump ourselves up, feel really good about ourselves, but not have the refinement, not see the nuanced nature of that belief, where it's benefiting us, where it's holding us back. Because as we start to see that there are aspects of it that are good, there are aspects of it where it might be holding us back, there are trade-offs, we can start to refine the belief down more and more, creating more separate chains. And you really think about how the mind learns, it's kind of like you got a tree, it's a branch, and it branches in multiple directions, and then those branch out and it keeps branching. So that's what we're doing. We're seeing it. We're seeing it. We're refining it. We're refining our mind, our knowledge. So we're really seeing it, we're refining it, and we're using that to empower us, to create a better life, to not get trapped by belief systems, to not get trapped by the mind, but use the mind in a way where it's actually creating massive change in your life. Using the mind so it doesn't hold you back, but it allows you to move in the directions that you want to move in.